Welcome back to Not Your College Life with Lisa Beals. This is episode number 61. I'm your host, Lisa Beals. I'm the Midwestern mom slash college administrator who's done the college thing myself, put a couple kids through school, and realized we administrators do not make it easy on parents or family. We don't provide you with the textbook with all of the terms that you need to know and all the dates you need to pay attention to. Oh no, instead we send you to thousands of websites to look up terms you have no idea exist. So I'm here to bridge that gap for you so that instead of pulling your hair out, trying to navigate the university system, you can instead focus on empty nester syndrome. Because I believe in college, the classes should be hard, not navigating it. Okay, in this week's episode, I have my friend Joy Alford Brand back. And you guys, this week we are talking about student loan servicers. We are talking about student loan forgiveness and Parent Plus loans. So this is a really good one. Joy taught me a ton of stuff. I know you're going to learn a ton of information too. So I hope you enjoy. Okay, yes. So we are talking about servicers, and I think that post, that article that I sent you that said there has only been 32 people in the history of student loan forgiveness that have earned forgiveness. 32.
Well, okay, now wait a minute.
What?
So we are only, what did I say, 13 years into that, is that right? It started in 2008. So, 2012, 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to make the correct number of qualifying payments.
120 payments. So that's what, 10 years? No.
Wait, nope. Remember, there's two different kinds of student loan forgiveness.
Okay.
Okay,
so let's start there.
Okay.
Student loan forgiveness has two types.
Right. So there's two kinds of student loan forgiveness. This is in my opinion. Okay. So student loan forgiveness, there's freestanding student loan forgiveness, which is public service loan forgiveness. And that's the 10-year program that you're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. And then teacher loan forgiveness and then that's only a 5-year program. And then
I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. So public service, the nonprofit, health, blah, 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 that's 10 mm-hmm. years. And teachers is only 5 years of repayment. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So my suggestion for people is if they can qualify for public service loan forgiveness, they're better off in that program. But anyway, so that's one kind of loan forgiveness. Okay. And I call that freestanding because it's its own they are their own programs, right? Okay. Then you have income-driven repayment plan forgiveness. Okay. So with income-driven repayment plans, and there are 4 different income-driven repayment plans.
Okay.
So with income-driven repayment plans, when you make your qualifying payments, then you qualify for forgiveness. You should qualify for forgiveness if you've made all of your qualifying payments for the necessary time period. Okay. And so for public service loan forgiveness, that time period is 10 years. So that's 120 payments. Okay. Teacher loan forgiveness is 5 years. And then most income-driven repayment plans are 20 years. So that's 240 qualifying payments. So those income-driven repayment plans, they have not, what we would say in the legal world, they haven't ripened.
They haven't matured yet.
Right. Mm-hmm. So there's no.
It's too soon to tell on that.
Right. So there's, if you have been in that plan since the very beginning in 2008, you still have
8 more years to go. 7 or 8 years. Yeah. Yeah. Still, if you're talking teachers and public service, you would think that's a lot of people and still only 32.
Yes. Yes.
That's embarrassing.
Well, I told you from the beginning that with public service loan forgiveness, the original program after that 10-year period, 99% of the people who applied for it did not qualify for it.
They didn't check all the boxes.
Right. And the reason they didn't check all the boxes is because of servicers dropping the ball, basically, in my opinion. But and then of course, there was temporary public service loan forgiveness, which was that pot of money set aside for people who should have qualified for public service loan forgiveness. And 98% of the people who applied for that weren't successful either. As if I recall correctly, it's 98%. Yeah. So those programs have been completely unsuccessful. And what happens is if you don't qualify for your public service loan forgiveness, now you've been in that program for 10 years and you've been trying to work that program for 10 years, right? And you've made 10 years of qualifying payments, right? And you are told, oh no, you don't qualify for forgiveness. Then what happens is that amount of money that you were looking to have forgiven then turns into a loan. So you got to pay it. And here you've been planning your financial future based on, well, in 10 years, I'm going to have forgiveness, right, for my student loans. And now you have to turn around and start making payments.
So the freestanding student loan forgiveness, there is no government oversight in the stipulations that the servicers put forth, that the borrowers have to, the hoops they put forth that the borrowers have to jump through. Is that an accurate statement?
That's an accurate statement. And let me just, I want to be really clear from the get-go. That term freestanding, that's my term.
That's your terminology. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go be able to Google, freestanding.
Right.
Federal. That's my term entirely. I set that term to designate them in my mind as two separate types of forgiveness programs, right? So, but you are correct. So in the Code of Federal Regulations, there is a list of rules basically that says, here are the things that borrowers need to do to qualify for forgiveness. They need to certify their employment. They need to work for a number of years. They need to make a number of qualifying payments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they have to have certain kinds of loans. So you cannot have, say, for example, federal family education loans. You can only have direct loans, so the federal direct loan program. So, and we can get into what that means. You might already know the difference between those kinds of loans being in the...
No, I don't.
Oh, well, we could talk about that if you want to.
Sure.
But that's kind of
a rabbit hole?
Well, yeah. So in a nutshell, federal family education loan program, that loan program was basically where third-party private lenders were lending money, but the government was setting the terms, and the government was basically saying, here's how these loans have to be administered, yada, yada, yada. But they were, private loans basically. And that program was discontinued. I can't recall when it was discontinued.
Okay.
I think right before the most recent income-driven repayment plans came into, were implemented. Mm-hmm. So now you no longer have third parties, private, lenders making those loans. Now you have the federal direct loan program, and those loans come directly from the government. Okay. So that's the main difference of those two programs. Mm-hmm. And so what that means is basically if you have an FFELP loan, which are not that old,
right?
It's not
been a long time since they've discontinued them.
You've been making your 10 years of payments in that FFELP loan, and then you apply for the forgiveness under public service loan forgiveness. Those kinds of loans don't qualify for public service loan forgiveness, and servicers weren't telling borrowers, hey, you need to have a different kind of loan. You're not going to qualify on.
What could they have done?
So basically, they probably would need to take out a whole different kind of loan and see if they could consolidate their FFELP loans under a direct loan.
But then they would have started that repayment clock all over again, yeah? Wow.
Well, and the reason is because that's a whole new loan. Those are whole,
Right.
So, and from the get-go, they should have been telling borrowers.
They should have disclosed that, yes. Absolutely. By the way, but then they would have lost out on all that interest.
Well, but so you can be in an income driven repayment plan while you're in the public service loan forgiveness program, making a $0 per month payment. So,
but if the servicer of those FF whatever, those family,
FFELP loans,
yes, if I was a servicer for one of those and I disclosed to you, oh, by the way, you probably need to get rid of this loan because this is not going to be eligible, would I have lost out on that interest that I would have been charging from you?
No, the interest go to the servicers. They're third
They'll
party.
still get it even if I refinance with someone else. Okay. I mean, it's not illegal, right? There's a lot of things that you think should be illegal that aren't, but.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Okay.
So technically, is it illegal? No. Are they acting? Okay, so what a lot of folks don't realize, this is something that it has been stuck in my craw for a long time. So people don't realize that servicers, when you're talking to your servicer, you are not talking to the federal government. You are talking to a third party for-profit contractor that works for the government. Okay. And they do not have a fiduciary duty to the borrower. That means, and that's a legal term, and what that means is they do not have a duty to act in your best interest. So
they're a for-profit entity and they're there for their shareholders or the bottom line for their company, right? Yeah.
Now, I have actually heard, and I don't want to put information out there that I don't know 100% if it's true or not. I have heard that they are incentivizing these, servicers or have in the past incentivized their employees who are in customer service to not spend a lot of time talking about your options. And so
what might be in your best interest as the consumer.
Right. And so when you are, talking to your servicer, they're trying to resolve your problem quickly and move on to the next borrower, basically. And so there's no requirement. There's no guidebook for servicers across the board. There are some minimal regulations for servicers, but they are very broadly drawn, and they are not there. There's nothing in those guidelines to require servicers to discuss the full range of options with each borrower. So when you're on the phone with your servicer, you're thinking, A, I'm talking to the government, and you are not. And B, they have to tell me, you just assume they're going to tell me what I can do. And servicers have a lot of discretion, a lot of power in how they administer your accounts. So say, for example, I actually know someone personally who has had to put her loans into forbearance, right? And so the servicer, I was actually present when she contacted her servicer, because not in a legal capacity, but just because I was interested. And she's like, yeah, you can sit here while I'm on the phone. So I was there and I was listening to the phone call, and the servicer said, oh, you need some time to sort out your situation. She said, yes, I do. And she said, well, we can put you in a temporary forbearance period. And so let's give you a 3-month forbearance period. And hopefully that will help you, give you time to get your head above water.
Sure.
And so that surprised me, because forbearance periods have a statutorily mandated time period. And so here they are giving her 3 months. And I was just super surprised by that. So they were giving her a shortened forbearance period, which actually is not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But they never discussed the fact that interest was going to continue to accrue during that forbearance period. And when the forbearance period was up, it would be capitalized. So they can kind of mix things up. I've also heard, now this one I wasn't present for, but I've also heard another individual I know who has an adult child who's in school, and she took out a Parent Plus loan for that adult child. And she had that Parent Plus loan for the 4 years that student was in school. And she had been making payments on the Parent Plus loan. Of course, they come into repayment pretty quickly. She'd been making payments on the Parent Plus loan the whole time. Well, when the student graduated and she contacted the servicer and said, okay, well, I want to know what my balance is. And they're like, your balance is still the full amount that you took out. And she said, excuse me, I've been making payments all 4 years.
All 4 years.
Said, oh, you've only been paying on the interest.
Because she didn't designate.
You haven't been paying on the principal. All of those payments have gone to interest only.
How was she supposed to know that?
I guess you're supposed to read the fine print yourself. So
financial literacy. Right.
Servicers have a lot of power, right? Servicers have a lot of power in how they administer the federal student loan program, basically.
That's infuriating.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Because the Department of Education doesn't administer any of it. They are delegating it out.
And they're doing no oversight to make sure that would you call any of that predatory? Or do you think that's too subjective?
So what's happening now is, I don't know that I would call it predatory necessarily, not from the Department of Education standpoint. I mean, the Department of Education is delegating this responsibility out, and there are regulations that say student loans, servicers have to basically be in compliance with certain rules, right? So there's nothing there, and they're pretty broadly drawn. They're not specifically saying this or that. They're just saying, you need to report on your numbers. You need to, that kind of stuff, right?
And it's not 30% interest rate.
Well,
like some credit cards.
Rate and the servicer,
they don't.
No, the interest rates are set by Congress. So servicers aren't setting the interest rate, and servicers aren't getting money from the interest. They're being paid by the government as contractors. Okay. So I guess the government can pay them out of the funds they're recouping. But servicers have been acting, in a not professional way. That's a very mild way of saying they have done things that are questionable. Okay. And so as a result, they've been sued. The big one was Navient back in 2017, I think, but there've been a number of lawsuits now. Mm-hmm. And so it's gotten to the point where states are starting to introduce and implement their own regulations for servicers, and not all states, of course, but some states out there are saying, okay, like Colorado and Maine and New York, and they're saying you have to do certain things in order to administer student loans in our state, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're starting to get to a point where there's a rub between state laws and federal laws, and all these lawsuits are starting to be filed at the state level, and there's starting to be issues about, okay, well, who says what servicers have to do? And I have said from the very beginning, and as I understand it, the Department of Education should have promulgated a guidebook basically for servicers saying these are the things that you need to do, including spending time educating borrowers with regard to their options, because a big issue that borrowers have had to deal with is student loan servicers steering them away from income-driven repayment plans and into forbearance. So, and there's pros and cons to both issues, but in my opinion, forbearance is worse, because the number one issue that most people have when it comes to student loan debt, the reason they take out $20,000 in loans and wind up owing $80,000. And yes, I do know someone who has taken out $20,000 in student loans and now at this point owes $80,000. So the reason people wind up in that situation is because they don't understand how interest is accumulated. That's just the bare facts. So, servicers need to be, because otherwise there's a big gap in education of folks who are taking these loans out. And I am a proponent of the federal student loan program. I think if you are smart about it and you know what you're doing, they can really be beneficial for you, but you have to know what you're doing. And there's no one out there educating people about federal student loan debt except for me.
So dumb that down for me. As a servicer, what is my financial, because I'm a private for-profit, what is my financial incentive for not educating the borrower? Is it clock hours for my employees that should be spent somewhere else? What is my incentive there for not educating you?
Okay, so again, I haven't seen any contracts. I don't know how these companies operate. The last thing I want to do is put information out there that I don't know to be true. I can only speculate.
Okay, so that's all this is just your speculation of their motivation.
Right. And so a for-profit company is trying to, make as much money as they possibly can. And so that would include, I would imagine, the number of accounts you service, versus the number of people you have to employ to service those accounts. So if you think about it, it all boils down to, okay, let's streamline our process. Even if they were thinking of it in beneficial terms, like they're saying, let's just streamline our process. Let's try to be as efficient as possible. Mm-hmm. And there's no one telling them, hey, you need to discuss every option with the borrower. You need to let them know there are 4 different income-driven repayment plans. You need to let them know, hey, you don't have the right type of loans to be in that public service loan forgiveness program. You need to let them know, hey, it's time for you to recertify your income for your income-driven repayment plan. Or, hey, your boss needs to sign your employment certification forms, or you know what I mean?
So they're not losing money if they advise them, other than
correct.
The man hours that they're paying to educate the borrower, right? They don't care financially if you go this income-based repayment or forbearance. That's the government that's benefiting from the additional interest.
The only way I would say they're losing money is that they can't, if they are really spending time talking to borrowers and explaining to them, oh, here's your options, here's the type of loans you have, et cetera, then they can only spend so much time. They can't scale it.
Right.
They can't,
right.
They can only spend so much time per borrower.
Because every situation is probably, it's not like you can do, you could do like what you've done, right? Is some webinars and get even 50% of the basic consistent information out there. And then the other half is me specific, but they're just not doing that. And who knows what that motivation is?
Well, on the one hand, and I'm not defending their activity necessarily, but on the one hand, I can see why. There's no one telling them what to do. There's no list of guidelines saying, here are the things you have to be doing for every borrower.
And they don't have an advisory board saying, wouldn't it be nice if you did this for your service, for your lenders? Wouldn't it be nice?
You need to train your customer service folks or your account representatives to go through, and I understand, I get it. When someone's calling you and they are in financial distress, I can easily see how that could take a while to manage that situation. Mm-hmm. Okay. Having been a bankruptcy attorney for a lot of years, I get it.
Hair on fire. You've dealt with that.
Right. Hair on fire. So, but at the same time, there are other things that they could do. They could just make a better effort. Another thing that disturbs me, and this is a quality I see with credit reports as well, there's no consistency in the information on websites. So just like credit reports, the big three credit reporting agencies, Equifax and Experian, their credit reports all look different.
Yeah.
And I get it. They're proprietary. I understand that. Student loans are a little bit of a different situation. So that's something that I think that they could work. There's just things they could do that could streamline the process probably even more, that would be more beneficial for borrowers to help them. Hey, look, here's a checklist of things you need to be thinking about before you contact your borrower. So, things like that. Or before you servicer, I'm sorry.
In your opinion, who are the quote good servicers? And do you get to pick as a borrower? Do you get to select? You can't.
You don't get to pick.
So is Great Lakes is one that comes to mind. Is that a servicer? Yes,
that's a servicer. Okay. I think that probably because it's been sued, the worst one is Navient. That's
okay.
And again, I don't want to disparage anyone. I mentioned Navient because I know that they've been sued
recently.
And but beyond that, the quality of experience you're going to have is largely due in part to the effort you put into managing it yourself. And I want to encourage everyone out there to be your own advocate, because folks really believe they're contacting their services, and their servicers are to an extent.
Their best interest is not always their primary focus.
They're acting as advocates to a certain extent for borrowers, and they are not. That's, and of course, this is why in the back of my Parents Guide to Better Borrowing book, I created the little servicer handbook. Yep, thank you. I created the little servicer handbook, and I also include it with both of my Student Loan Debt 101 webinars, because I hammer away at it to a certain extent, because I try really hard to make sure people understand this is on you. You signed on the dotted line. You are the borrower. And here's something a lot of people don't know. If you don't pay your federal student loan debt, okay, and it goes into default, and you are, trying to do what's right, pay your taxes, they can offset your tax refund.
Yes.
To apply it to your student loan.
Your stimulus, right? They could have deducted. Could they deduct your student loan debt from your stimulus, or just your tax returns?
Tax returns.
Okay.
Tax returns. Stimulus, no, I don't think so.
Okay.
But
I have heard more than one person be surprised when they got their tax return because they had bad student loan debt that the feds decided we're just going to collect on it.
I haven't read in any legislation that stimulus money, because another round of stimulus payments are coming out.
Yeah.
I haven't read anywhere that stimulus money is subject to offset. Okay. Here's another thing a lot of people don't know. If you don't pay your federal student loan debt and you get to the age where you're ready to apply for Social Security, they can garnish your Social Security payments.
Student loan debt is also not dischargeable in bankruptcy. Is that correct?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So to a certain extent, no. But there are circumstances where it is dischargeable. But a couple of things have to happen. First of all, you have to pass something called the Brunner test. And that is a 3-pronged test that requires you to show a number of things. It's going to be a hardship. You've made some payments. You're never going to be able to pay it. Basically, it's a pretty subjective standard. And the other thing that goes along with that is judges at the bankruptcy court level, at the district court level, they make decisions on whether or not you've met that standard. So that's an issue. You got to know your judges. You got to know what the likelihood is in your jurisdiction that you're going to meet that standard. Because in order to discharge student loan debt in bankruptcy, you have to file something called an adversarial proceeding. Now, this means you have already filed the bankruptcy petition. And the adversarial proceeding is basically a lawsuit that you file inside your bankruptcy that says, I need to have my student loan debt ruled dischargeable. Okay. So it's not like you can just list it on the petition and it goes away.
It's a
No.
whole nother proceeding
Yeah.
on top of
You
that.
actually,
Okay.
yeah. And
Okay.
federal district court.
Okay.
And your creditor is the federal government who has deep pockets and lots of attorneys.
Yeah.
So it is a mountain
Okay.
to climb.
Okay. If your student passes, their debt is discharged with their debt. Accurate?
Yes, as long you would have to you have to have a certified death certificate, of course, and you would have to provide that to the Department of Education. Now, if you have taken out student loans for your student and
Parent
that student
plus loans,
and that student passes away,
those stay with you.
yes,
I've heard that. I will say, so interestingly, I have done some research online with Parent Plus loans myself. I do not see a lot of people in the financial world that endorse them as a good thing. A lot of people see them as problematic from the borrower perspective because you're on the hook. In fact, I just had a parent email me to say, I took out a Parent Plus loan for my student when they were in school, and now we're estranged, and I want them to take over this loan, and they won't. Can you make them? No. You signed on the dotted line. This was your response. You said yes. Yes, it was for them. It's just like if you buy them a car and they total it, they don't have to pay that loan. They don't have to pay you back. It was you purchased it and gave it to them. My question or my comment, I don't know if it's a question or not. I did help counsel a student as they were navigating moving from a junior college to a private college. And every year his parents were not supporting him financially. One of the parents just doesn't handle money well. And so they had no money to support him. So he was doing his financial aid, doing grants and Pels and loans and all of that. And the private institution said, if your parent applies for a Parent Plus loan and is denied, we can offer you more grants or loan money. Is that an accurate statement?
Wait, say that again.
He was told, have your mom apply for a Parent Plus loan. And he said, she's not going to get it because she has shitty credit. And they said, that's okay. If she applies and is denied, then you become eligible for either additional grant or additional loans to come up with the difference.
If she's denied, you become eligible. I think that sounds right to me, but I'm going to have to check on that.
And I think it was actually additional loan value for him rather than grant.
That sounds correct. I'm going to have
because he walked away with, I want to say at the junior college, he was there 2 years and he maybe had $20,000 at the junior college in loans. And then after 3 years at the private university, he racked up an additional 40 grand.
It is very sad. Okay. So I'm actually wrong about something. So,
okay. Let's hear it.
Okay. About if your student dies, your Parent Plus loans, okay, are discharged.
Right.
Okay. So what happens to my parents' Parent Plus loans if my parent dies or if I die?
Okay.
So it turns out, and when I said that, I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right to me. Your Parent Plus loan will be discharged if your parent dies or if you, the student on whose behalf your parent obtained the loan, die. So what
really? Okay.
What happens is you'll need to have, of course, a certified death certificate, and likely you're going to have to fill out a little bit of paperwork. But at that point, you do get a break. If your student dies that you took out a loan for, you have to jump through some hoops, but you could get that loan discharged. They're minimal hoops. So,
okay.
Yeah. But now I don't know if that's true of course, whenever I'm talking about student loans, I'm talking about just federal student loans, not
right. No private. Right.
That's a whole different.
We're never talking about private. Yes.
Right. But so you're going to want to fix that in the edit.
Yes.
If at all possible.
Yes. Yeah. We'll go back.
So if your parent applies for a Parent Plus loan and they don't get a Parent Plus loan, then I do think that the student is eligible to apply for more
additional loan
aid.
amount. Okay.
Right. I think that's correct.
Okay. Which I mean, you as a student, right? I guess you have to weigh it out. Is it worth your education to borrow that additional, I don't know, $5,000 to pay your tuition? And you have to wonder, is there no one at the college level that's talking these students, right? You've got the servicer on the other end. And is there anybody at the institutional level that's educating students on everything they're putting in front of them, or pointing them to resources to educate them about what's this long-term, and what are the long-term implications of everything that you're just signing off on? No one's doing that. Sign this promissory note, go through this, because I think my daughter, if I remember right, when she was in college, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, she had to go through some online training before she was allowed to sign her promissory note. I promise you, she just click, click, click. She didn't pay attention. I think there needs to be some assessment that they understand. I mean, even some like shock, hand smack information for them when they're going through that, to make them pause. Okay, wait, that's scary. Let me back this up and read this again. Because right now, I think it's all about just, what do I need to tell me where I need to sign to get the money so that I can go to school.
Well, but she's lucky that she has you in that regard, because you are, vigilant about that. But I do think that if we can get them before they graduate from high school, then that's a good start at stemming this tide. So there's a three-pronged attack that needs to happen here. First of all, the programs need to be fixed. Public service loan forgiveness needs to be fixed. That is just abominable, because, well, anyway, we go over that again and again and again, but that needs to be fixed. Secondly, servicers need to be regulated.
As much as I'm not a huge fan of government oversight, when I see the detriment that is happening to borrowers, I think it's warranted. Yes.
Yeah. Servicers need to be regulated. Yes, they need to. In this situation where schools, student loan debt has gone up 300% since I graduated from college. And so when you're talking about taking out basically what could amount to a small mortgage in some circumstances, and you don't understand how it works, you don't understand how interest works. It's not like, just a basic amortized mortgage that you can pay on the principal and the interest. In circumstances like that, yes, I agree. It does bear the whiff of predatory lending, right? And I don't know that I don't think that's intentional necessarily. No. I don't think so. Although people don't realize that by statute, interest gets paid first on federal student loans. People don't understand that.
Right.
So if all of the folks out there, all of the borrowers out there were actually paying their student loan debt, the government would be making a killing. So because people are having to take out so much money to go to school now, right? And then the third prong of attack is borrowers need to be educated before they're actually taking out these loans. They really do. And so I'm trying to work on that myself, because I can't force regulation on anyone. I can't force the government to fix anything. So all I can do is, teach people the basics. And so
for dirt cheap. That's what I'm here to help. That's what I'm here to help do, is, like you, educate the borrowers. I don't know how to do it myself except to point them to you. So,
and the information is there. Now, when I do want to give one caveat, those webinars in my Parents Guide to Better Borrowing, what I'm talking about in those materials and all that content is what is in the Code of Federal Regulations. That's what the government says. These are the rules. Right? That's where the government says these are what the rules are, is how I should say it. And so that is what I have contained in my materials. I have not contained information from each individual servicer.
Right.
So your servicer could be administering the rules a little bit differently.
Okay.
But those are those rules that are in the Code of Federal Regulations that the government has said these are the guidelines you need to file. These are the rules you need to follow. Those are the materials I use to build my products and write my book.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the best foundation that I think you can have getting started. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's probably going to change at some point, but it is what it is. So.
But we know someone that can update us when it does change.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. Mm-hmm. All right. This was really good, Joy. This was really good. I am going to, again, link to your webinars. I would love it if you let me know. I don't know if you ask where people heard about you from, but I would love if you'd let me know if anybody does happen to redirect, because we've learned them here. But I am certainly going to push, I'm going to push this for sure, because I am a huge advocate of educate yourself, educate your student, because.
And look, you don't have to buy the $97 webinar, which I think is pretty cheap to begin with.
I mean, there's a $10 book, people. That's a cup of coffee at Starbucks for a lot of you.
Mm-hmm. Right. And even if you are a college student, you're not a parent or a high school student, that book still has a lot of information that can be useful for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Okay. I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, Joy.
No, thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.